The Elythian capital sparkled like a jewel in the darkness of space. Towers of glass and crystal floated above gardens that glowed with soft bioluminescent light. Rivers of liquid silver wound between the buildings, reflecting the twin moons in the sky. But despite the beauty of her world, Queen Lyria felt an emptiness she could not hide. For decades she had ruled wisely and fairly. Elythian technology was unmatched, their culture rich and beautiful. Yet the greatest concern of all haunted her heart. She had no heir. The future of her people, her entire civilization, depended on a successor. And after years of failed attempts, the council had grown desperate. It was during a grand meeting that the council proposed a plan so unusual that it sent a ripple of shock through the room. "Your Majesty," spoke the elder counselor, his voice calm but firm, "we have found a solution. We propose a union with a human." Lyria's violet eyes widened. Humans. She had met them before, briefly, during trade missions. They were curious, adaptable, and unpredictable, but to suggest she marry one was unheard of. "Are you suggesting I take a human as my partner?" Lyria asked, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. "Yes, Your Majesty," the counselor replied. "A human named Adrian Corin. He has a reputation for wisdom, integrity, and diplomacy. He is a man of vision. We believe he could offer what has been missing, the spark needed to ensure a child and perhaps a brighter future for our people." Lyria's mind raced. A human, from a distant planet filled with chaos and unpredictable behavior. Could she trust one? Could she even like one? And yet, the council spoke with certainty. Their proposal was not merely political, it was the last hope for her people. Days later, Adrian arrived on the Elythian capital ship. He was tall with sharp features and calm brown eyes. His uniform, simple yet dignified, marked him as an ambassador of Earth. As he stepped onto the glowing platform, he took a deep breath. The city shimmered in ways he could not have imagined, and the air hummed with soft music, an energy that seemed alive. Lyria stood at the center of the council chamber, her regal presence commanding the room. She wore the traditional Elythian robes flowing like liquid starlight, and her expression was unreadable. "You are Adrian Corin," she said, her voice steady yet carrying a hint of curiosity. "I am," Adrian replied, bowing respectfully. "It is an honor, Your Majesty." Lyria studied him. There was something honest in his eyes, something human yet strong in a way she could not define. She expected arrogance, perhaps fear. Instead, she saw calmness, respect, and curiosity, the very qualities that the Elythians prized in their leaders. "You understand why you are here," she said, her tone formal. "I believe I do," Adrian answered. "Though I admit, this is unlike anything I have ever faced." The queen tilted her head. "Most humans have not faced Elythian traditions. Most humans do not survive the intensity of our ways. Do you think you can endure it?" Adrian smiled faintly. "I do not know, but I am willing to try. For your people. For the future." Lyria blinked. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. Unlike Elythians, humans were not bound by centuries of rigid tradition. They could adapt. They could understand through empathy rather than hierarchy. Perhaps, she thought, this was why the council chose him. The first days were tense. Adrian learned quickly, observing the customs, listening to advisors, and asking questions. He walked the floating gardens with quiet reverence, noting the harmony of nature and technology, and he asked questions that even Lyria had not considered. "You grow these gardens without machines," he said one morning, crouching beside a glowing flower. "It is beautiful, but it seems fragile." "How do you protect it?" Lyria smiled faintly. "We do not protect it from all danger. Life must take risks or it cannot thrive." Adrian nodded, thoughtful. "In that case, the beauty is not in perfection but in resilience." "That is human too, in a way." The queen's brow arched. "Do humans survive because of resilience?" "Partly," Adrian replied, "but also because of cooperation, empathy, and sometimes curiosity. We do not always have the strongest bodies or the best tools, but we have minds that adapt and hearts that care." Lyria remained silent for a long time. There was truth in his words, she realized. Perhaps humans had strength she had never considered. Evening fell and the city's lights shimmered against the twin moons. Lyria and Adrian walked along a bridge that stretched over a river of silver. The air smelled faintly of flowers and the soft hum of Elythian energy vibrated beneath their feet. You must think this unusual, Adrian said, breaking the silence. Unusual? Lyria repeated, her voice soft. Yes, but also necessary. My people need a future. I do not know if I need a human. Adrian stopped walking, turning to face her. Perhaps you do not need me, Queen Lyria. Perhaps you only need someone willing to learn, to grow with you, and to understand your world. Her violet eyes studied him. There was something in the human's calm voice that made her heart beat faster, something that made the emptiness she had carried for so long feel slightly less heavy. The days passed. Adrian immersed himself in Elythian culture. He learned to navigate the floating gardens, understood the delicate rhythms of their city, and even attempted their language, clumsy but earnest. Lyria observed him, curious at his persistence, amused at his mistakes, and slowly, grudgingly, impressed by his willingness to adapt. One afternoon, the council gathered to discuss the political implications of the union. Some members were skeptical, whispering doubts about human influence and loyalty. Lyria listened quietly, her mind not on politics but on the man standing beside her. Adrian spoke with tact and humility, offering ideas that respected Elythian tradition while bridging it with human ingenuity. The council was silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. Even the most skeptical voices could not deny that he offered wisdom and creativity, not domination or arrogance. After the meeting, Lyria found herself walking alone in the royal gardens. Adrian joined her, carrying a small tray of glowing fruits. "You eat, Queen Lyria?" he asked, offering one. She shook her head. "I have tasted these countless times." "Why offer them to me now?" "Because," he said simply, "sharing is how humans connect. Perhaps it can be your way too." She laughed softly, a sound rare and bright. "Perhaps," she said, and for the first time in many years she felt a flicker of hope. The bond between them was slow, cautious yet undeniable. Adrian did not force friendship or affection. He learned her ways, respected her authority, and shared his human perspective without demanding change. Lyria, in turn, began to wonder if a human could offer not just a future heir, but a new way of thinking, a partner who might help her see possibilities she had never imagined. That night, as the twin moons reflected in the silver rivers, Lyria stood on the balcony of her chamber, watching the city glow. Somewhere in her heart, a small seed of trust had begun to grow. The council had chosen wisely. Perhaps this human, this stranger from another world, could help her, and her people, find a future brighter than any she had dreamed. The Elythian city thrummed with life. Crystal towers shimmered in sunlight, and the floating gardens swayed gently, their luminous flowers casting soft reflections on the silver rivers below. For most Elythians, it was a world of balance and perfection. For Queen Lyria, it was still a world of unanswered questions until Adrian arrived, bringing human curiosity that stirred things she had long thought fixed. Adrian had settled into the royal quarters beside the palace gardens, a simple, elegant space filled with the soft hum of Elythian energy. Unlike other humans she had encountered, he did not try to dominate or impress. He listened, asked questions, and tried to understand. At first, Lyria had been cautious, observing him from a distance. But now, as the days passed, she found herself considering his ideas, sometimes in silence, sometimes aloud. "Your Majesty," Adrian said one morning, kneeling beside a glowing plant that bent toward the sunlight streaming from the floating ceiling. "This plant responds to touch differently than others. It reacts to thought patterns. How does it know what to respond to?" Lyria tilted her head, intrigued. "The plant senses intent. It cannot understand language, but it can sense your focus, your purpose. Humans seem different. You have many things in your mind at once, and yet you try to focus on one at a time. Perhaps that is why it reacts to you." Adrian smiled faintly. "We are complex, but I suppose all intelligent life is." She studied him closely. There was no arrogance in his tone, no desire to prove superiority. Instead, he asked questions and offered ideas in ways that seemed to respect the balance of her world. That day, the council summoned them both to discuss a delicate matter. Rumors had begun to spread. Some Elythians questioned the wisdom of their queen being joined to a human. While the union was legal and supported by the council, tradition and skepticism created whispers that traveled faster than the wind through the floating city. "Your Majesty," Councillor Theron began, "some factions of our people are uneasy. They fear that human influence might disrupt Elythian ways. How do we reassure them?" Lyria glanced at Adrian. He stepped forward calmly without hesitation and spoke in measured words. "Respect for tradition does not mean rejecting new ideas," Adrian said. "The Queen is wise and strong. A union does not replace your culture, it strengthens it. If anything, this partnership shows that Alethians can grow, adapt, and thrive even more," the council murmured. His words were simple, yet they carried clarity and logic that even the most skeptical could not easily dismiss. Lyria allowed herself a faint smile. "Indeed," she said softly, "we must not fear the future. We must guide it. That is our duty." The council meeting ended, and the two of them walked through the floating gardens to clear their minds. Adrian studied the plants carefully, noting the delicate balance of life and energy. Lyria observed him in return, noting how carefully he watched, how he adjusted to her world without trying to change it. "You do not try to dominate this city," she said. "Most humans, when given power, would try to reshape it. You observe, you adapt. That is unusual." Adrian chuckled. "We learn quickly when we must, and I would rather understand than disrupt. I have learned from observing you that your people value balance and patience. I do not want to harm that." Lyria's expression softened. Perhaps this human could offer more than diplomacy. Perhaps he could teach her something she had long forgotten: patience, understanding, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. Days turned into weeks. Adrian learned the intricacies of Alethian society, the floating gardens, the flowing energy currents, the delicate rhythms of life. He asked questions and proposed solutions in ways that were respectful yet innovative. One afternoon, a small problem arose that tested both of them. A floating garden platform began to tilt dangerously, threatening the delicate balance of the plants above. Technicians rushed to stabilize it, but their standard methods could not succeed without risking some damage. Adrian knelt by the control interface. "What if we redistribute energy in the surrounding circuits? Balance the flow to counter the tilt?" The Alethian engineers hesitated. It was not the standard procedure. But under Adrian's careful instructions, they adjusted the energy currents. Slowly, the platform stabilized and not a single plant was harmed. Lyria watched quietly, amazed. "You solve problems differently. Not by force, but by understanding and adapting." Adrian nodded. "Humans rely on creativity, not only strength. Sometimes thinking differently can protect more than following old rules." Her eyes held a spark of admiration. Perhaps humans, she realized, had qualities that Alethians did not: ingenuity, flexibility, and a perspective unbound by centuries of tradition. That evening, Lyria and Adrian walked along the crystal bridge over the Silver River. The city glimmered beneath them, and the soft hum of energy made the night feel alive. "You are different from other humans I have met," Lyria said softly. "You do not demand my world change. You do not seek control. Why?" Adrian looked at her, his eyes calm. "Because I have seen what happens when people try to impose their way. I have learned that understanding and patience often create better results than force. And I respect your world. I respect you." Her heart stirred. She had ruled for decades, guiding her people with wisdom and fairness, and yet for the first time she felt a quiet hope that the future could be more than survival. It could be growth, cooperation, and unity. Weeks passed. Adrian continued learning and Lyria continued observing. Small gestures became important. A shared meal in the glowing gardens, discussions about culture and history, walks under the twin moons. Slowly, trust formed. They still carried the weight of their roles, queen and human diplomat, but something deeper began to grow: understanding. One day, Lyria brought Adrian to a secluded platform high above the city. From there, the entire capital lay before them, a tapestry of glowing towers, floating gardens, and silver rivers. "Do you see it?" she asked. "This city, my people. The balance we maintain. Everything is delicate. One wrong move and it could all collapse." Adrian nodded. "It is beautiful, and I can see why balance matters. But I also see potential, new ways to grow, new paths forward. You and your people have achieved wonders, Queen Lyria. Together, perhaps we can achieve more." Lyria regarded him silently. His words were not empty promises. He believed in possibility, in cooperation, and in respect. She realized that this human, this stranger, was not simply a visitor or a tool for politics. He could be a partner, not in the traditional sense, but in a way that neither Alethians nor humans had imagined. In the following weeks, A minor political challenge tested them further. A faction of Elithians feared human influence and demanded proof that Adrian's presence was beneficial. Lyria and Adrian worked together, organizing community projects, sharing human ideas for energy management, and improving garden stability across the city. Slowly, the doubters softened, seeing results rather than fear. Lyria felt a quiet satisfaction. Not only had Adrian adapted to her world, but he had also enhanced it without forcing change. His human qualities, curiosity, creativity, and empathy, were beginning to inspire admiration, even in those who had doubted him most. One night, as the twin moons shone over the city, Lyria and Adrian stood in the royal gardens, listening to the soft hum of life around them. "You have changed the way I see my people," Lyria said. "Not because you forced me, but because you offered a different perspective." Adrian smiled softly. "Perhaps that is all humans can do, offer perspectives. You choose what to keep. You choose what to grow," she nodded. A new thought flickered in her mind, hope. Perhaps the future she had feared could be brighter than she had imagined. Perhaps with this human, she could bridge worlds in ways that no one else had dared. The Elithian capital had never felt more alive to Queen Lyria than it did now. The glowing towers reflected the twin moons with dazzling clarity, and the floating garden swayed gently in the soft night breeze. But what made it truly alive was the presence of Adrian. The human diplomat who had arrived as a political solution was now a quiet, constant companion in her daily life. At first, Lyria had resisted the thought of closeness. She had been trained to rule, to maintain distance. Emotions, while acknowledged, were secondary to duty. And yet, Adrian's calm demeanor and unwavering respect had begun to erode the walls she had built around herself. One morning, they walked together along a suspended path over one of the silver rivers. The air shimmered with soft energy, and the distant hum of the city was almost like music. Adrian paused, bending down to observe a glowing plant that seemed to pulse with light. "You notice everything," Lyria said softly, her voice carrying amusement. Most humans would simply walk past and never see it. Adrian glanced at her and smiled. "I have learned that details matter. Sometimes the smallest things tell the biggest stories." She studied him. The truth of his words lingered longer than the sound. For all their differences, humans and Elithians shared a desire to understand, to care, and to preserve. Perhaps that was why she found herself drawn to him, not as a political necessity but as something else entirely. The bond between them deepened in unexpected ways. They shared meals in the palace gardens, talking about human history, Elithian culture, and even the stars themselves. Adrian would tell her about Earth's oceans, its mountains, its people, and Lyria would recount stories of her ancestors, of wars avoided and discoveries made. One evening, as the twin moons reflected on the silver river, Adrian asked a question that made her pause. "Do you ever feel lonely, Your Majesty?" he asked quietly. "Even with all this beauty, all this power?" Lyria looked away, studying the distant lights of the city. "Yes," she admitted, "lonely in ways that are hard to explain. The crown carries responsibilities that few can understand. And for years I have carried the thought that I would never have an heir, never continue my line." Her voice faltered slightly. "I feared that emptiness would never end." Adrian reached out, placing a hand lightly on hers. "Perhaps it does not have to be ended alone," he said softly. "Perhaps some things grow best when shared. You do not have to face the future by yourself." Her heart stirred at his words. They were simple human words, yet they carried weight that resonated deeper than any Elithian council decree. For the first time in decades, she felt hope, not for her people but for herself. Days turned into weeks, and their companionship began to show subtle changes. Lyria found herself laughing more often, sharing small joys and seeking Adrian's perspective on matters both minor and significant. Adrian, in turn, learned to navigate the subtleties of Elithian emotion, understanding when silence was more powerful than words and when humor could bridge tension. One afternoon, while walking in a secluded section of the floating gardens, Adrian noticed Lyria pausing near a bioluminescent pond. The water shimmered with colors that shifted in response to light, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. "Why do you stand here alone?" he asked gently. "I often come here to think," she said. "To reflect, it is peaceful." Adrian nodded. "May I join you?" "Of course," Lyria replied. and for several minutes they stood side by side in quiet contemplation. "You are different from anyone I have known," she said at last. "Humans and Alithians see the world in such different ways, yet you fit into this world without trying to change it." "How?" Adrian smiled faintly. "I listen. I observe. I respect what is already here. And perhaps I try to learn more than I assume I know. That has served me well." Lyria's gaze softened. "It has served you well indeed. And it serves me well too." The subtle shift in their relationship did not go unnoticed by the council. Whispers spread of a growing bond between Queen Lyria and the human Adrian Corin. Some Alithians were intrigued, others skeptical. But the Queen's authority remained unchallenged, strengthened by the visible cooperation and unity between them. Yet even as their relationship blossomed, challenges arose. One morning, a delegation from a distant Alithian province arrived, concerned about rumors of the Queen's growing affection for a human. "They fear the future of the throne," Lyria explained calmly to Adrian. "They worry that human influence may weaken our traditions." Adrian considered this carefully. "Then we show them that respect for tradition can coexist with understanding. We do not replace what is old. We enhance it." Lyria nodded. "Yes, we enhance it together." Together they met with the delegation. Adrian spoke respectfully, acknowledging Alithian history and values while offering insights from his human perspective. Lyria supported him with authority and wisdom. Slowly, the delegation's skepticism softened. They saw that the bond was not a threat but a promise, a partnership built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. That evening, Lyria and Adrian walked along the crystal bridge once more, reflecting on the events of the day. "You handle these matters with grace," Lyria said. "I did not expect a human to understand the subtleties of Alithian politics so well." Adrian shrugged. "I have learned from the best teacher," he said softly, glancing at her. "And I have observed carefully without trying to dominate or control. Understanding takes patience." Her heart warmed at his words. She realized that patience, understanding, and respect, the qualities humans often possessed, were not weaknesses. They were strengths, and in this human, she saw a future where those strengths could be shared, nurtured, and cherished. The quiet moments they shared became increasingly personal. One night, as they stood in a private garden lit by soft, glowing flowers, Adrian asked a question that made her pause. "Do you ever imagine a future, not just for your people, but for yourself?" he asked. Lyria looked at him, her violet eyes reflecting the soft light. "I have imagined many futures for my people, for myself. It is harder. I have not thought much about what I desire, only what I must do." Adrian took a small step closer. "Perhaps your desires and your duties do not have to be separate. Perhaps they can grow together. You do not have to choose between ruling and hope, between responsibility and happiness." Her breath caught at his words. In them she felt not just logic or diplomacy, but sincerity, understanding, and something deeper. A human heart reaching across the divide between worlds. The bond between them grew in ways neither had anticipated. Lyria began to feel something she had long feared impossible. Trust. Not just in Adrian, but in the possibility of connection, partnership, and shared purpose. And Adrian, who had arrived as a solution to a political problem, found himself deeply invested, not in duty, but in the person before him. Their relationship was not romantic in the way humans might imagine. It was something more profound, a connection built on respect, understanding, and the shared hope for a better future. And in that connection, Lyria felt the first stirrings of a new possibility, one that reached beyond politics and duty. Weeks later, a quiet miracle seemed to announce itself. Lyria noticed subtle changes in her body, small signs that she had not felt in years. The thought of a child, once distant and impossible, now began to take root in her mind. She did not speak of it immediately, unsure if the signs were real or merely wishful thinking. But Adrian noticed her quiet reflection and offered support, never pressing, never intruding. "You seem thoughtful," he said one morning, offering a tray of bioluminescent fruits. "Are you considering something important?" She smiled faintly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I am simply observing life as you do. You have taught me that observation can be as meaningful as action." Adrian nodded. "And action guided by understanding can create wonders." In the following days, Lyria reflected on the changes she felt within herself, not just physically, but emotionally. The bond with Adrian had grown from curiosity to trust, and from trust to a quiet hope. Hope for herself, for her people, and perhaps one day, for the future of a child born from the unity of two worlds. As the twin moons rose over the Elythian city, Lyria stood on her balcony looking down at the glowing rivers and floating gardens. Adrian stood beside her, silent yet present in a way that spoke more loudly than words. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to imagine a future not dictated solely by duty, but by connection, understanding, and shared purpose. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, that small seed of hope began to grow, quietly yet powerfully, hinting at the miracle that might come. The bond between the childless queen and the human diplomat had become more than a solution to a political problem. It had become a bridge between worlds, a promise of unity and the beginning of a story that neither Elythians nor humans would ever forget. The Elythian capital had never felt more alive. The glowing towers shimmered like stars brought down from the heavens, and the floating gardens swayed in the soft wind of the evening. Yet the city's calm energy was tinged with whispers. Rumors had begun to spread about the growing bond between Queen Lyria and the human Adrian Corin. For Lyria, the rumors no longer mattered. Something far more personal had begun to bloom. A small, quiet change in her body, almost imperceptible, stirred hope in a way she had not felt in decades. She had long feared the possibility of bearing no heir, and now, against all odds, that fear began to lift. Adrian noticed her quiet reflection one morning as they walked along the Silver River Bridge, the twin moons mirrored in the water casting soft light across their path. "You seem thoughtful," he said gently, glancing at her. "I am," Lyria replied. "There are changes, I feel. Perhaps a gift of life?" Adrian's eyes softened with understanding. "If it is what I think, then the universe has smiled upon us." Lyria looked at him, a mixture of wonder and apprehension in her eyes. "Yes, perhaps it has. But the path ahead will not be simple. Not all will accept this." Adrian reached for her hand, holding it firmly but gently. "Then we face it together. Whatever comes, we are partners in this and everything else." The news of her pregnancy, when it was confirmed, spread quickly through the palace and the city. It was met with awe and cautious celebration. The hybrid child represented more than just a lineage. It was a symbol of hope, unity, and the possibility of cooperation between two very different species. Yet not all were pleased. Some factions whispered concerns. "What will happen if the child cannot adapt to Elythian life?" they asked. "What if human influence weakens our traditions?" Lyria listened patiently, her violet eyes calm and steady. "This child will be raised with respect for our ways, guided by wisdom and loved for who they are. Do not fear the future. Embrace it." Adrian supported her through the challenges. He spoke with counselors, provincial leaders, and skeptics, emphasizing that the child was not a threat but a promise. His calm demeanor, respect for Elythian customs, and unwavering dedication won over many who had doubted. Slowly, fear gave way to cautious optimism. During this time, Lyria and Adrian grew even closer. The bond between them, rooted in respect and understanding, deepened into something tender and personal. They spent evenings walking through the glowing gardens, discussing everything from the city's energy systems to the possibilities of interstellar travel. Yet even amidst joy, Lyria remained aware of her responsibilities. One afternoon, she met with a group of midwives and scholars to prepare for the child's arrival. The Elythians were curious about human biology, and Adrian shared knowledge about Earth's methods for caring for mothers and newborns. Lyria listened carefully, integrating the lessons with Elythian techniques, creating a unique approach that honored both traditions. "This child," Lyria said thoughtfully, "will not be purely Elythian nor purely human. They will be a bridge. They will be a living connection between worlds. We must prepare wisely," Adrian nodded, "and they will have two guides who care for them deeply. That will matter more than anything else." Days turned into weeks and the pregnancy progressed. Lyria experienced small joys and quiet moments of wonder. The glow of the floating gardens seemed brighter, the city quieter in her presence, as if the universe itself recognized the significance of what was growing inside her. Yet challenges persisted. Some factions continued to whisper doubts, and a few counselors questioned whether a hybrid heir could truly rule one day. Lyria addressed them with calm authority. Leadership is not born from blood alone, she said. It is nurtured through guidance, wisdom, and compassion. This child will have both human and Alithian gifts. That is not weakness, it is strength. Adrian spoke alongside her, reinforcing her message. Humans adapt. Humans learn. Humans care. And these qualities, combined with Alithian wisdom, will ensure the child thrives. Fear of the unknown should not outweigh hope for what is possible. The city slowly began to embrace the idea. Celebrations were held in small gatherings honoring the new life. Flowers from the floating gardens were woven into decorations, and soft lights illuminated pathways. Children of both species played together in the parks, symbols of the harmony that could exist between humans and Alithians. Amidst the preparations, Lyria experienced moments of quiet reflection. She stood on the balcony of her chamber one evening, gazing at the silver rivers and glowing towers below. Adrian joined her, his hand brushing lightly against hers. I sometimes wonder, Lyria said softly, how different life would have been if humans had never come to our world. Adrian smiled faintly. Perhaps we were always meant to meet. Perhaps this was the way to bring new life not only to you but to your people. She looked at him, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the city's glow. You have changed my life, Adrian. You have taught me patience, understanding, hope, and now this child. This child represents all that we have shared, all that we have built together. He squeezed her hand gently. And we will continue to build together. For the child, for your people, for both our worlds. As the months passed, the child grew, and so did anticipation. The palace prepared chambers filled with soft light, energy shields, and floating cradles. Alithian scholars and human scientists collaborated to ensure every need would be met. The hybrid child would be nurtured in a way that honored both species, combining strength, intelligence, and empathy. The day finally arrived when Lyria felt the first signs of labor. Adrian remained by her side, calm and supportive. Midwives, scholars, and healers moved quietly, creating an atmosphere of peace and focus. The glowing gardens outside reflected the tension and excitement within the palace walls. Hours passed. Lyria breathed steadily, guided by the knowledge and support of those around her. Adrian's hand rested on hers, a steady anchor in the shifting currents of the moment. And then, in a quiet, miraculous instant, the child arrived. The room filled with a soft glow, not from the Alithian lights or human technology, but from the pure energy of life itself. Lyria held the child, feeling warmth, vitality, and hope coursing through her. Adrian stood beside her, awe and tenderness in his eyes. It is perfect, he whispered. Lyria gazed at the child's small features, a blend of human and Alithian traits. The eyes, large and curious, reflected the twin moons outside. The tiny hands, delicate yet strong, seemed to hold the promise of the future. Yes, she said, her voice soft but certain. Perfect. A bridge between worlds, a new beginning. Word of the birth spread quickly through the city. Alithians gathered in the streets, floating platforms and gardens, their faces alight with wonder and hope. Humans visiting or stationed on Alithian planets rejoiced as well. The child was not just an heir, it was a symbol of unity, possibility, and the strength that could come from collaboration and understanding. Counselors who had doubted the union approached Lyria and Adrian, bowing in respect. We see now, one said, that hope can take many forms and strength can be found in unexpected ways. Lyria smiled. Yes, and it is our duty to guide this hope, to nurture it and to ensure it grows. Adrian, standing beside her, nodded. Together we can face whatever comes. With understanding, compassion, and unity, anything is possible. As the city celebrated, Lyria held the child close. She whispered softly, words filled with promise and love. You are the future, little one. You are the bridge, the hope, the life that will guide us all, and you will never face this world alone. Outside, the twin moons reflected in the silver rivers and the floating gardens glowed brighter than ever. The universe itself seemed to pause, witnessing a new chapter unfold, one of unity, cooperation, and life. In that moment, Lyria knew that the journey, while only just beginning, had already achieved something extraordinary. Humanity had touched Alithian culture in ways no one had imagined. Love, understanding, and hope had triumphed. not through force, but through patience, empathy, and shared purpose. And as she looked at Adrian standing quietly beside her, she understood that the true miracle was not just the child, but the bond between them, a bond that had grown from curiosity into trust, from trust into unity, and from unity into a promise of a better future for all. The hybrid heir, small and fragile yet full of potential, lay in Lyria's arms. The Elythian city, once a place of beauty and order, now shimmered with something more: possibility, hope, and the power of two worlds coming together as one. The Elythian capital shone like never before. Crystal towers reflected the light of twin moons, and the floating gardens glimmered in gentle motion. But the city's brightest light was not the bioluminescent glow of its architecture. It was the presence of life, hope, and unity. For the first time in decades, Elythians and humans stood together not as visitors and rulers, but as partners in a shared future. Queen Lyria sat in her chamber, cradling the hybrid heir in her arms. The small child was a perfect blend of human and Elythian traits: large, curious eyes that reflected the twin moons, delicate hands that seemed both fragile and strong, and an aura that seemed to carry the promise of two worlds. Adrian sat quietly beside her, holding her hand and gazing at the child with awe and tenderness. "This is more than I ever imagined," Lyria said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "Not just a child, but a bridge between worlds. A symbol of hope for all of Elythian society." Adrian nodded. "And it is also a reminder that unity is possible, even when the odds seem impossible. Humans have adapted to countless challenges. Elythians have survived and thrived for centuries. Together we create something stronger than either alone." The days that followed were filled with preparation and celebration. The palace organized ceremonies that honored the child while respecting Elythian traditions. Scholars, counselors, and citizens from across the city came to witness this historic moment. For many, the hybrid child was proof that understanding, patience, and cooperation could overcome fear and doubt. Despite the excitement, Lyria remained mindful of the challenges that lay ahead. She knew that not all Elythians would immediately accept the child. Some still whispered concerns about the influence of humans on Elythian culture, but she faced these worries with the same calm authority that had guided her for decades. "Fear is natural," she told the council one morning, "but it must not guide our actions. Our child is a living promise of the future, and it is our duty to nurture that promise, protect it, and teach it strength, wisdom, and compassion. That is what Elythians do best." Adrian stood beside her, adding his perspective with quiet conviction. "Humans have learned to work together across differences, to adapt and to care for the future. That is what this child represents. It is not just bloodlines, it is hope and possibility, and that is stronger than fear." The council, inspired by their words, began to shift. Doubt softened. Skepticism gave way to cautious optimism, and soon the entire city embraced the idea of the hybrid heir. Elythians and humans began working together more closely than ever, sharing knowledge, resources, and ideas. The city's energy and innovation reached new heights, fueled by collaboration and mutual respect. As the weeks passed, the child grew stronger. Lyria and Adrian took turns nurturing and teaching, combining human and Elythian methods to provide the best care. Lyria marveled at how the child responded to both human gestures and Elythian energy patterns. A living testament to the strength of unity. One afternoon, while walking through a section of the floating gardens, Lyria held the child gently in her arms. The small fingers wrapped around hers, and the child's eyes tracked the soft glow of the plants around them. "This child," Lyria whispered, "will learn the ways of both worlds. They will know empathy, courage, and wisdom, and they will grow knowing that two species came together for them." Adrian walked beside her, his gaze steady and proud. "And that is a lesson no book or teacher could fully teach. They will learn it through love, through example, and through trust. That is humanity's gift. And yours as well, Lyria." The public ceremony to introduce the child to the citizens of the Elythian capital was unlike anything the city had ever seen. Floating platforms were decorated with luminous flowers. Soft energy shields glowed like protective halos, and citizens from all walks of life gathered to witness history. Humans who had settled or visited the Elythian worlds came to celebrate alongside the Elythians, a symbol of interstellar cooperation and friendship. Lyria and Adrian stood before the crowd holding their child. The soft hum of the city filled the air, blending with the sounds of celebration and anticipation. Lyria spoke, her voice strong and clear yet gentle. "People of Ilithia," she began, "today we witness a new beginning. This child represents hope, unity, and the power of understanding. They are not just an heir, they are a bridge between worlds, a symbol of what is possible when we choose cooperation over fear, curiosity over skepticism, and love over doubt." The crowd listened in silence, the weight of her words sinking deep. Then one by one they began to cheer, their voices rising in a wave of support and joy. Ilithians who had once doubted the union now stood in awe, recognizing that the future had arrived in the form of a small, fragile, yet extraordinary child. Adrian spoke next, his tone calm and inspiring. "Humans and Ilithians have come together not because we were forced, but because we chose to understand each other. This child embodies the best of both our worlds: resilience, wisdom, compassion, and hope. Together we can face any challenge, and together we can build a future stronger than either species could alone." The citizens erupted in applause. For the first time, the Ilithian capital was not just a place of beauty and order. It was a place of unity, shared purpose, and hope. In the quiet of the palace after the ceremony, Lyria held the child close. The tiny features reflected both human and Ilithian heritage, a living proof of connection and possibility. Adrian stood beside her, hand in hand, their bond strengthened by the journey they had taken together. "This is only the beginning," Lyria said softly, gazing down at the child. "There will be challenges, questions, and struggles, but we face them together. And this child will lead a new era with love, wisdom, and strength." Adrian nodded. "And we will guide them as partners, as friends, as family. That is the true power of unity." The weeks that followed were filled with teaching and learning. The hybrid child responded to both Ilithian energy patterns and human gestures, adapting quickly and displaying early signs of intelligence, empathy, and curiosity. Scholars from both species marveled at the child's ability to integrate knowledge and understanding from multiple cultures, recognizing that this was not just a child, but a pioneer, the first of a new generation capable of bridging worlds. Lyria often walked through the floating gardens with the child in her arms, teaching lessons about balance, observation, and empathy. Adrian guided them in the ways of human cooperation, problem-solving, and creativity. Together, they created an environment that nurtured strength, wisdom, and understanding, showing that the combination of their worlds could create something extraordinary. One day, as the twin moons reflected in the silver rivers, Lyria spoke to Adrian quietly. "Do you ever think about how far we have come?" she asked. Adrian smiled, his eyes reflecting pride and wonder. "Every day. From strangers brought together by circumstance, to partners guiding a future for two species. It is extraordinary, and it is just the beginning." Lyria nodded, holding the child closer. "Yes, just the beginning. And we will face it together, with hope, courage, and love." The city around them hummed with life, glowing brighter than ever. Citizens of both species moved together, sharing knowledge, celebrating achievements, and embracing the possibilities of unity. Children played freely in the gardens, their laughter a testament to what could be achieved when differences were respected and combined. In the palace, Lyria and Adrian watched their child, now a symbol of hope, understanding, and possibility. They saw not just a life growing, but a future being shaped. A future where humans and Ilithians could thrive together, learning from each other, and building a world stronger than either could have alone. The hybrid heir would grow knowing that love, patience, and cooperation could overcome fear, doubt, and even centuries of tradition. They would inherit not only the wisdom of Ilithian rulers, but the ingenuity, empathy, and courage of humanity. And in that inheritance, the universe itself seemed to recognize a new path forward, one filled with possibility, unity, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As the twin moons shone above, casting their reflection across the silver rivers, Queen Lyria whispered softly to her child, "You are the future, my little one, a bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope. And you will never walk this path alone. Together we will face whatever comes, and together we will build a new era." Adrian, standing beside her, smiled quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "A new era indeed. And it begins with this child and with us, all of us, working together." The Ilithian city, alive with light, sound, and energy, reflected the unity that had grown between humans and Alithians. The hybrid child lay peacefully in their mother's arms, a living symbol of courage, empathy, and hope. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, the promise of a future built on understanding, collaboration, and the strength of humanity shone brighter than any star. In that moment, the universe itself seemed to pause, acknowledging a new chapter, a chapter where differences were celebrated, cooperation was rewarded, and life, both human and Alithian, flourished together.